Hey friends, the kids and I are here to give a little bit of a demonstration about what it means to live in different cultures. And so we're going to use Play-Doh as our example, and we're going to do a little science experiment. So what we're talking about is what it's like to mix cultures or live in two different cultures or live in a culture that's not your own, and how that's different for adults than it is for kids. So we're going to use red to illustrate American culture in our case, and blue is going to represent Honduran culture. And so what happens when you mix those two together? So here, now I'm all dirty, but this represents me, this chunk of red Play-Doh. So I grew up in Ohio, and so I'm thoroughly American in everything that I think and the way that I look at life. But then, Boston, can you hold this for me? Don't mix them together. Then what happens is we move to Honduras and bits of blue start to get mixed in, right? And so there are things about Honduran culture that have changed who I am, and they become part of me, right? And so I have now this wonderfully braided, mixed kind of thought process, because there are parts of Honduran culture that have embedded themselves into who I am. And so that represents that mixed togetherness. See that? But there's a different thing that happens when with kids. What happens with kids? So what I want you kids to do is mix and mold and squish your Play-Doh, okay? And because do it, work it, just work it, smush it, just smush it like they're doing. As the kids are growing up, these little bits keep smushing, just keep smushing. These little bits of Honduran culture are getting stuck in, but they're still growing and developing while this is all happening. And so as they're, smush it really good, smushy, smushy, just keep smushing, mix it all together. See, they're growing up. Smush it, mix it all blended. And so what happens then is all those lines get blurred for them, and it just becomes one new kind of culture. And so the color that they have is this beautiful purple. It doesn't really come out in Play-Doh, but I think you can understand the concept. And look at the color. Lilia's is probably the most smushed. Boston's is probably next. Smush it really good. I'll put some more in yours. Smush them all together until you can't see the difference. Or at least you can just see wavy kind of curls.
That?
Knead it like bread. A little bit more. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, Lily, let me see yours. So that by the time she grows up into a full-grown adult, she has this blended color now, which is kind of purple. The color's not great with this Play-Doh, but it's kind of purple. And it's no longer the braided mixed together one like I am. It's all blended together into one. And so this purple represents how kids adapt to another culture. And in fact, this has been called third culture. There's a book by I think it's David Pollock, and I forget his co-author's name, but they wrote a book called Third Culture Kids, and it's to illustrate this idea that for adults we have two cultures that we're living in, but for kids it creates a third culture that's all their own, and it's a completely blended. And so it's red and blue and purple. And so if you want more information about that, you can read that book, Third Culture Kids by David Pollock, and I'm sorry to his co-author because I don't remember her name. But so that's just a little illustration. This is something that missionaries talk about, and other, there's other kinds of kids who work whose parents are in the military or maybe work for the State Department or things like that. But kids who travel and who live outside of their passport country, this is kind of what happens. And sometimes it can be confusing for them to tell the difference. So when you hear us talking about that, this is what we're talking about.